Good Friday night. It's very late, but showing up to deliver something. I may still not be able to make it by the self-imposed deadline of midnight, end of week Fridays, but at least I'm here. Anyway, it's been a long day. It's been a long week. I don't necessarily have a something elaborate talk about or present like in my previous videos. This one is more of a, I guess you can call it a reaction video. I'll try to make it short because I don't think I'm necessarily adding anything new to the pot in terms of takes or whatever. I think everything that needs to be said and that's useful has been said. And I'm specifically referring to a video that came out recently. It was by a YouTube channel called NeetCode, which is by, actually, I don't think I know his name. I don't think I know his actual name, but I'm pretty sure that it's a famous, okay. All right. So this is the video. He made the rounds 12 days ago. So it was titled, maybe some people should just give up. I'm not going to play the video in its entirety, but, and again, yeah, the channel is really popular for having these LeetCode solutions. And the point that was basically being made here by the developer or the, the channel owner. I'm very sorry. I should know. I should know his name. Just even out of respect. NeetCode. Let me see. Wisdom. No, this is such a sidetrack. But I believe that it's important to attribute things by name if you can. I should have done this before I started the recording. And so now I have to take you through. Anyway, forgive me. I did not do all the proper research. Navdeep? Okay, yeah, we'll go with that. I have no reason to believe that this is just an alias. I'm gonna assume that this is his actual name. Navdeep Singh. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Okay, personal site just goes to YouTube. Anyway. All right, so yes, so in this video, his point is basically that there is this trend of essentially people consuming rather than learning, right? Because more than ever, access to technical content is plentiful, right? I think that's a correct way to put it. Yes, the access it's very hard today to, with a straight face, say, I want to learn X, Y, Z in tech or, even I would say engineering in general, but let's just focus on software engineering and say that you don't have access to the resources that you need, right? That's very unlikely, right? So there's this abundance of content that's available out there for people to access. The problem is people have mistaken the act of consuming this content versus learning. And part of it is something that has always been true. Learning is not easy. I think generally speaking, the brain actually likes to learn. It just likes to learn stuff that is useful. Right? One way to put it is there are certain things that unless you have the right motivation to do them, you're just gonna suck at them, or you're just not gonna put in the amount of effort and intent and I guess intensity and focus that is required to learn the skill or learn the thing or just get shit done. So you need something that motivates. Otherwise, your brain will find a way to just snip it. Your brain is it's very good at just filtering and ignoring stuff and just garbage collecting stuff. So the act of just going on YouTube and just clicking on a video and just watching it without an actual direct intent, I mean, on its own, it's fine. But as long as you're not deluding yourself into thinking that you actually are learning by doing that, right, then you're fine. But if in your mind you're thinking, oh, I'm watching all these videos where these people are talking about this deep technical subjects or whatever, and I'm listening to it and all that, that's not actually learning. That's more like you should consider that to be discovery. Right? You are discovering things. You are adding something that to your, I guess, your world model, we can call it that, or I wouldn't even say foundational model, but just your awareness of things, right? Maybe you've never, for XYZ reason, right? You've never had to deal with mmap, right? Directly as a programmer, but you may be on Hacker News and you'll see that, hey, somebody wrote a blog post about mmap, right? Which is a system call. Not a lot of engineers deal with system calls on their day-to-day jobs, but you may come across an article that talks about some system call, in this case mmap, and yes, you should browse it, you should look at it. Let's say you are doing your transit, right? While in traffic or something, coming back from the office or going to the office, or maybe on the bus, something, you just check it out, right? But do not confuse that with I understand mmap, right? So I think that was really the intent of the video. I know the title is harsh. Maybe some of the things in it, if you watch the whole thing, you may not agree with every single point in it. But I think for me, the overall idea is it's a fair assessment. And it's the fact that people are mistaking being exposed to technical content means that they actually understand that content. Right. And I think it's something that also, it's easy not to notice that difference if you don't pay attention to how you spend your time doing certain things. Right. If you value your time for XYZ reasons, because you have obligations, you have your job, you have, things to do in life, you can't help but realize that my time is really valuable. My attention is really valuable. Do I just want to watch, passively this another tech tutorial or something just passively in the background? Is that really the best use of my time? Like, what's the point of this? Am I actually trying to learn about this topic? Do I actually need it for a project that I'm working on? These are the questions you should be asking yourself. Why are you watching this tutorial right now? Right? Maybe you've never done Haskell before. Maybe you've never done TLA Plus before. Like, you've never had to write it for your job. And the algorithm recommends it to you. A video on Haskell, a video on TLA Plus, a video on C++ if you're a JavaScript developer. What I'm not saying is that you should ignore it and say, I'm never going to watch it. It's a tutorial on C++ because, all I do is JavaScript. What I'm saying is, don't watch, dozens of C++ tutorial, one after the other, and deluding yourself into thinking that you understand C++. What you should be doing, and this is a general thing, not just for learning programming languages, but also just learning about things in software engineering in general, let's say with systems or protocols, right? You come across an article a blog, some YouTube video, or even a bunch of research papers, a book, something related to your field of interest. Maybe you're working on a project at work that requires you having to work on certain components of the stack that you haven't dealt with before, or certain technologies. So you have that discovery phase where you're aware that there's that content out there. What you should do is, instead of just assuming that you need to read this content right away, right? You should maybe try to bookmark it, right? Bookmark it, make note of it, maybe just glance at it, right? Don't necessarily read it because you're assuming that you're interested in it and that you want to digest all of it right there and there. Instead, bookmark it, make note of it. And now with AI, what you can do, right? And this is one of the things that AI is really useful for, especially with the deep research feature of ChatGPT, is you can, once you've accumulated, maybe it's a weekly ritual, or maybe even daily, depending on how, it's up to you, daily or weekly or even monthly, depending on your workload or whatever. You go through those bookmarked documents, content, whatever, and you ask an agent, a deep research agent like ChatGPT, you say, hey, take all this content, right, that I've come across. I haven't read it. I haven't read all of it. I've just glanced at them, and this is a curated collection of content. Do some research and basically generate a learning guide based on that content, right? You can tell it, generate, 32 questions or 100 questions, whatever you want, whatever number you're thinking of, whatever. Anyway, the number doesn't actually matter. It's just generate a bunch of exercises or questions. For each question, maybe add a couple of hints, right? For if I'm stuck, where should I look? The AI, when it's putting that document together, can then add hints that relate to the original source material, right? The stuff that you've curated during the discovery process. And because you're also using you should for this, because you're using something like deep research, you can also pull in external stuff that you yourself didn't actually curate, but it will do it for you, right? By relating the stuff that you created, the stuff that you picked, with external sources that it thinks are also relevant or will help as part of your study on this topic. And so it generates the questions, it adds hints that you can refer to if you feel stuck. And essentially, it allows you to move from this baseline, just easy to do passive mode of consuming the content, to actually using the content to learn and to understand different topics that you are interested in. It actually forces you to really make your time count as you are consuming all that content that you are discovering or finding out about. Instead of just passively just sitting and reading an article, now you make it part of some study guide where you actually have to actively think about the subject and understand where your limitations are, the things that you thought you understood, or maybe you had a vague idea about some particular aspects of a topic, but these questions, this guide that was generated by the agent, will force you to actually, when you do sit down to do this work, you will feel like you're actually doing work instead of just reading stuff and nodding along and saying, oh yeah, I get this, or I've seen this word before, I've seen people talk about this particular thing before, I think I get it, right? It allows you to go beyond that and actually force yourself to learn the material, basically. And so an example of this would be looking at this documentation by the folks that are working on Multigres. So some background on Multigres, it's essentially an effort to build a really good distributed PostgreSQL database. And it's by one, if not the creator of the same thing that was done with MySQL, and they call it Vitess. My understanding, which I would say is mostly vibe based, and I emphasize the vibe part because it's mostly based on things that I've read and things that I've heard people say. It seems that MySQL in a distributed deployment at large scale, especially using Vitess, it seems that it does better than Postgres. And I want to be very clear, I'm talking about distributed deployments, not single node deployments. Distributed at very large scale. I think the vibe is that MySQL and Vitess wins when it comes to OLTP, online transactional workloads. So with that in mind, this project makes sense because Postgres it's touted as the most beloved open source OLTP transactional database out there. People love it, right? In fact, there is a saying of just use Postgres, right? Whenever people are like, oh, I have this application that I'm building and I want a database that does that and all that, and I'm trying to figure it out, and people people tend to, I mean, there's a saying out there that says, just use Postgres. Postgres will be fine. Like, for the most part, they're not wrong, right? I think OpenAI, I believe OpenAI, for example, I don't know if this is still true, but OpenAI, for the OLTP workload, they run a single node. Well, there's the whole backup thing, for high availability. But really, it's a single node Postgres instance. That's huge. Like that's, a lot of people are building applications that will never reach the scale at which OpenAI is operating. So yes, I think the advice of just use PostgreSQL can apply to many scenarios. But it's also true that the distributed PostgreSQL story is not so great. There's a lot of different projects that have been working on it, but my understanding is that it's at very big, large scale. People tend to default to MySQL. Meta is using MySQL for the longest time. Google and YouTube were using MySQL. Yeah, and I mean, there was a reason why PlanetScale is one of the best database providers out there. Okay, so that's the background on Multigres and why it exists. Now, since we're talking about a distributed database, it follows that you have to talk about consensus. And so the creator of Multigres has gone through the process of essentially writing down what they're thinking as they're building Multigres, what they're thinking in terms of consensus. And this is great, right? For them to come out and just several months in already feeling confident enough to say, hey, this publicly, this is what we're going with in terms of consensus. That's that's really great. And it's something that if you're interested in, distributed systems, consensus protocols, this is great stuff. This is great content. This is great material to learn from, or even just have as a tool to expand your knowledge, right? Your knowledge base. But it's also very technical and very dense stuff. The idea that you can just sit down on your couch and passively consume this is, well, it's a lie. Unless you're somebody who's actually, built distributed systems and who's actually written consensus protocols or, dealt with them with a very, in a very visceral sense. And even in that case, I will argue that just casually consuming this stuff is not, it's just not a good idea, right? And it's almost a waste of your time, even if you're experienced enough to be the one who wrote the article or this series of blogs. If you're reading this, it's probably because you intend to write about it yourself, provide some sort of critique or review, talk about how you will do things differently, things to watch out for, that kind of stuff, right? So whether you're experienced already and you already know this stuff, or you don't know this stuff and you're just kind of wanting to get into it, or maybe you do, but not to the degree that you will be able to put this together yourself, right? Even as a write-up, after having spent some time really deeply thinking about putting together a consensus protocol, right? In any case, the idea that you can just passively consume this it's a lie. You're lying to yourself, right? In the moment as you're reading it and you're nodding along, it probably feels good, right? But the truth is, you're not actually learning anything. You're not really understanding anything. So instead of doing that, what you can do is make use of the tools that are available to you, right? You use something like ChatGPT, you use the deep research functionality, and you end up with something like this, right? Where you put together some sort of booklet. In this particular case, I asked it for 67 questions. Don't ask me why, just 67 specifically. Yes, it's dumb and related to the whole fad of 6-7 that's going on right now. Also because I knew that I was going to possibly talk about this if I didn't find anything else to talk about, to be able to put a video out. Anyway, 67 question, right? You put a guide together. So instead of just sitting down on your couch or, I don't know, whatever, in your living room and passively reading this, you put together a guide like this, right? Each page, each chapter is a bunch of questions that you have to answer, or at least try to answer. And if you get stuck, you have hints. And the hints are based on the curated content, mostly the original stuff that you curated, so that you can use the hint as a way to go back to the source material, in this case, the blog post articles, the series of blog posts, and use that hint to navigate through the content and use the information that you're reading to answer the questions, right? Because now you're not just passively reading, you're reading because you're trying to figure stuff out, to answer questions, to formulate ideas, to connect different ideas, to really make concepts stick in your mind, right? Because there is a goal. There is an actual direct thing that you're trying to solve. You want the answer. And so, again, you're not just passively consuming or reading the content anymore. You are actively trying to answer questions. And by answering those questions, you are actually forcing your brain to think about. And it's okay if you don't have the answers right away. In fact, that's great because it shows that there's stuff to learn. There's stuff that you don't know, right? You have a collection of words together that if you're just passively reading them, it feels like you understand what's going on. But when you are now faced with an actual question that you have to answer and, formulate, whether it's talking about it out loud or writing the answer on paper, you start to realize, oh, wait, I thought I understood what this particular thing meant, but now that I actually have to answer a question on it, I'm not so sure anymore. And so that really forces you to be aware of the gaps and really get your brain to work, right? Which by default it just doesn't want to, because it's telling itself, why do I need to care about this? I don't care about this. True reason for me to care about this. But by doing it this way, via the question and answer model, you basically are communicating to your brain, no, like these are things that I actually care about. I want to know the answer to this. If I don't know it, we need to figure this out. Worst case scenario, right? You realize, actually, I don't actually care about this specific topic, right? It's also a good way to make yourself realize, I have this, maybe you have some favorite tech publishers, right, who publish articles on different topics and all that, and you just like reading the stuff they put out. Well, if you are consuming the content in this way, right, in this question and answer way, it will, in some cases, make you realize, I actually don't care enough about this topic to expend my brain power on actually understanding the details of it all. So, so basically it's also a good way to filter out the noise, or at least make you realize, I don't care about this stuff at this moment right now. Like, I could be instead working on something else, or trying to investing more time into understand another topic, because that is more pressing, that is more interesting to me at the moment. So yeah, that's I think that's basically it. The idea that there's a lot of information out there, right? There's a lot that you can learn about, but you really have to be careful and not trick yourself or delude yourself into thinking that discovery and passive exposure to technical content is enough for you to truly understand. Yeah, for you to just really learn and understand, right? Things in your domain. And yeah, that's something that people need to keep in mind. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think this went a little longer than I expected. I'm not surprised by I don't know if you can say it's a backlash. I'm not that online to know exactly if it was mostly negative or mostly positive of reception, but I know that, there was enough of a reaction that I became aware of it. So yeah, anyway, I think I've said what I wanted to say. And yeah, the lesson here is use your tools. If there's one thing that these AI agents are good for, is, them doing the work of searching and compressing information for you, sometimes to a fault. But so you also need to watch out for that. But right, pattern matching, finding stuff, which basically reducing the search space. They're really good at that. Use them for this. Use them to avoid just passively consuming things, especially, technical content that you're trying, if your goal is to learn and really understand things, you really need active learning. And one way to do that is by putting together stuff like this where you are forced to really question the things that you understand and the things that you don't. And through that process, which admittedly can be quite painful, right? Because nobody likes to feel dumb, right? But yeah, through that process, you realize, oh, I don't know as much as I thought I did about this particular topic. So, it forces you to do the extra work that's required to move from just kind of knowing about stuff and actually understanding stuff. And on that note, we'll end. And I hope this was an interesting video for you and that this was useful. If that's the case, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.